Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your board game doctor today. In this very rapid review, I'm going to talk about a game, a blast from the past, Findorff. This is a game by Freedom and Freeze that came out about 3 years ago, and it's been on my list to play. I've always wanted to try it out, never had the chance to do so. Saw this in the bargain bin at the game store, and so I picked it up and I've played it a few times, and I'm ready to talk about it. So essentially, in this game, if you haven't heard of it, it is a autobiographical type of game of Freedom and Freeze's hometown, where you are in the 1900s or 18 to 1900s, building up this town or this district of Bremen, and you do so by using a personal rondel of actions. You cycle through four different actions in order. You get to choose in which or how far you progress on this rondel before you circle back. And there's always a bureaucracy type of event after you go through the entire rondel, hopefully getting some cash as well as some benefits along the way. But in addition to that, you can upgrade your rondel by making your actions more efficient by adding more action points towards them. You can make your production of resources even better as well. And ultimately, you are converting these resources into buildings. One, you can make buildings, little tiny huts that you place down, which can help you gain cash as well. But you can also play down buildings that are historical markers of Findorff. These buildings can come out in a different order depending on your player count. There might be a market that you have available to you. If you're playing solo, you have roughly half of the buildings in your hand variably mixed up. And so you're building these buildings for the majority of your points. There is an indeterminate number of rounds when you play the multiplayer game where you lay down tracks across the Findorf district. And as soon as all of the spaces are filled by players, the game and is triggered. Whoever has the most points wins. And in the solo mode, you have a beat your own score system where you play over 25 rounds trying to get as many points as you can. When comparing this game to others, it has the type of Rosenberg style of feel to it. I think Rosenberg and games in general, and this one kind of approach, Fields of Arl is like an autobiographical game of Rosenberg's. Hallertau is like about a town in Germany, right? So uh, it has that same approach to it. Mechanically, it is different. I think the closest Rosenberg game that I could compare this to would be Glass Road in terms of having a somewhat limited amount of buildings that you're building. The variability essentially comes out in the what's in your hand versus what's in the market, and the variability of those limited amount of buildings will potentially direct your strategies in one way or another. And Fields of Arl is kind of like that as well, with the amount of variability that comes with the buildings. I think there's less in Fields of Arl compared to Findorf and Glass Road, but it is pretty similar. Power Grid is, I think, the most compared game because, and I've heard some people call this Power Grid Light because of the market of peat that you use in this game. It fluctuates based off of how many people are using peat to heat their houses. If you build more houses, you use more peat, it becomes more scarce, and it's worth more if you deliver peat to the market. But if everyone has used it, or if no one's really selling it, then you will sell it for cheap. And so that fluctuates throughout the game, and honing in on that market to gain as many dollars as possible is what you want to try to do. And then finally, Praga Kaput Regni was the first game that I thought of. I know Vladimir Suhi is the designer of that game, and many other games that utilize uh, rondels, whether it's a personal rondel or a shared rondel of actions. And so I felt like Praga Kaput Regni was one of those games that really utilized that rondel type of system to cycle through different actions like you do with Findorf. And I feel like Findorf is very much limited. There are essentially four actions that you take. Every action in and of themselves allows you to, for example, buy a certain production tile or action upgrade. The productions, depend on what um, or you can buy a building as well. The production actions also allow you to produce in one or many of your own production tiles, etc. So there are different things and different avenues that you can go down with these actions, but they are varied and they cycle through in a very similar way to me as it was in Praga Kaput Regni. So going into some thoughts that people had on based on the Board Game Geek comments for this game, a lot of people enjoyed this game that it was relatively easy to learn. The rulebook is only about 4 to 5 pages long, but it's somewhat difficult to master, right? It's not a heavy game per se, but the strategies that you can learn in this game based off also off of the buildings that you're trying to build can be quite difficult to understand strategically at first, and it takes a couple of times to really get into it and shows some potential for higher level play. The solo mode is quite challenging for some as well. A lot of people, enjoy the challenge that that provides. But overall, a lot of people who had good things to say about the game enjoyed the aesthetic, the theme, and the simplicity of the rules, which are a gateway to the more strategic avenues that this game provides. However, not everyone enjoyed this game. A lot of people thought that the components themselves were a little bit over the top for what this game is providing. The board size, for example, is very big, and it's according to a lot of people actually on Board Game Geek unnecessary in the game, as it essentially keeps track of the uh, the railways that you're placing on as a time trigger for the end of the game, the places to put your houses, as well as to mark off that buildings are played. However, there aren't usually any benefits of doing so. One of the things about this game is that the little huts or the houses that you place for your workers, the rules say that you can play them into designated spots on the board, but if there aren't any spots available, you just play them anywhere, right? And so there's really no use for those spaces on the board, as well as these tokens that you play when a certain building is played. I think it's more of a thematic slash historic type of presentation to show you what this place looks like and where these tokens are, but mechanically, it doesn't fit well with the game. Some people had some issues with how fiddly this game was in terms of the components as well as some of the actions. I feel like that is targeted towards the bureaucracy step when you pass that trigger on the rondel and have to stop and gather money and, do things. It kind of interrupts the flow of play in addition to taking the action that you have selected for that round. So overall, um, people, enjoyed how quick this game could play, but for others, even despite the overall time being quick, it seemed like turns could drag out a little bit longer sometimes. But then other times, the turns were very quick. Like when you take workers, it literally takes 2 seconds to announce that you're doing that, take the workers, call it good, right? And so it really varied, and it seemed to interrupt some flow for some folks when they played this game. So for my thoughts on this game, I quite enjoyed it, and I would suggest it as BGG tells you to, with a rating of 8 or higher. I thought the learning experience was really good. There's not a lot of rules overhead. The play length is very appropriate. I like the overall strategy of the different buildings that you have in front of you, and the kind of the direction that those buildings offer. There is a draft mode in this game as well to increase the strategicness of what kind of buildings you're going to go after. I tend to enjoy games that have a lot of uh, in terms of, some people find this as a negative, but like the opening moves are somewhat scripted, right? You start with a power one of every single type of action, and so there could be a lot of potential for certain openings that you want to pursue with your actions as to what do you upgrade first with your and purchase, with your starting money. What do you, skip ahead towards to be, get to a certain building first or a certain production tile first. There are, I feel like, a couple of different avenues that you can pursue based off of the different, opportunities and strategies that the rondel provides, despite it being very simplistic. So I really like that. And because of that too, and I think this applies really well in the solo mode, that the turn by turn decisions, whether to you don't have all the time in the world in the solo mode to just go through the rondel one at a time and upgrade things slowly. You have to be very efficient, and you have to skip over actions to do things maybe twice in a row or what have you to accomplish what you want to get that really high score. And I think that would also apply in the main game with the indeterminate rounds of action. I feel like you do have to, be as efficient as possible to race to build certain buildings first, to get certain production tiles first, and trigger the end of the game on your own terms, right? So I think that that all makes sense. The thematic integration I think is nearly perfect. It's a pretty simplistic game, an abstracted game, and so I think more of the thematic integration is with the board and the components, which are, I agree, unnecessary for play mechanically, but do offer a more, I guess, abundant and thematic ambiance for you to play this game with. It's not the most variable game. I think, despite me comparing it to Glass Road, I think Glass Road does have a lot more variability and therefore replayability in my books, because there are more buildings to play with, and two, you have that player interaction with the specialist cards that you have in that game. Here, it's mostly just those buildings in which order they come out of, right? Otherwise, it's purely like a static setup. It's the same setup, kind of like Caverna, right? Where the there and Fields of Arle, where there's not a lot of input variability at the beginning of the game, and not a lot of or any variability throughout the game. It's all player dependent. But I enjoy that, and I think that it provides a more strategic game and experience than perhaps what is at surface level for how small the rule book is and how straightforward the mechanisms are in this game. The solo mode is very challenging. I do enjoy that. It reminds me of Adiwa and the solo challenges there. Adiwa, another Rosenberg game, is a somewhat straightforward worker placement game where the mechanisms that you're doing are pretty straightforward, and the multiplayer experience could potentially be very samey from game to game. But I feel like the solo mode offers some different challenges and pursuits that make it very interesting in how you tinker with the systems that are provided in the game. And I feel like that's the same with Findorff as well. So I really do enjoy the puzzle that Findorff offers as a solo mode, but I also think it has a lot of potential to be mastered over quite a few games, despite what other people who have negatively said about how this game would feel samey. This is the kind of puzzle that I think I attach to more, and so I look forward to playing Findorff more and hope for continued excitement as I get this game to the table more often. Very happy and glad that I have had the chance to purchase this for so cheap. Seems like a diamond in the rough to me from a few years back, and I enjoyed and am glad that I've had the chance to experience this after so many years. So those are my thoughts on Findorff. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As always, hope you schedule an appointment with me real soon, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.